What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the Week 14 Rapid Rundown, kicking off right now, presented by the Fantasy Facts and Fantasy Data, giving you all your projections, injuries, start, sit advice, everything you could need going into this, the final week for most leagues of your regular season, the last week before playoffs. If you're like me, a lot of teams did really well this year, except for in their record, and you're fighting for some of those playoff spots. Um, that's what we're here to talk about. What do you got to do to get into your playoffs? And we're going to hit the whole week 14 slate to get that going for you. But first, make sure you give the show a follow at the Fantasy Facts on Twitter. Give fantasydata.com a look. That's where we get all of these projections. I put it all together right here where we get all of that information, and from bettingdata.com. That's where I get all of the betting lines and everything, which are set to New York because that's where I live and it helps me out. But you can go in and set whatever state you want. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. All right, week 14 kicks off with two really important narratives across the whole line here. One is it is bipocalypse. It is for this to be the last week before playoffs. It sucks. It sucks. There are so many people on bye. Chicago is on bye. No Justin Fields. India is on bye. No Jonathan Taylor. No Michael Pittman. Not like you're starting Matt Ryan, but he's off there too. Washington is on bye. There's a couple of just like flexible starters that were in there as well. McLaurin has finally been coming on, and now he's gone. Atlanta's on bye. Again, kind of a mess, but there's some startable guys in there like Cordell Patterson and whatnot. Green Bay's on bye. A guy like Christian Watson has been doing phenomenal, but on bye. And New Orleans is also on bye. Again, some big name guys in New Orleans that are going to be obviously out of your lineups this week. So, not only do we have a bunch of buys, there are a ton of injuries to monitor. So, we're going to be jumping in, trying to give you the most up to date injury pieces. If I miss any of it, feel free to jump in, let me know, and I can pull up right away what their latest status is based on NFL.com. All right. So, jumping straight into the games, we have a game this Thursday night. We have the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the LA Rams. The LA Rams are without Aaron Donald again, which could mean great things for Josh Jacobs, except he's dealing with a calf injury. The calf injury did not hold him out last week, and he still had a great game, over 100 yards on the ground. I expect that to happen again. I do not expect him to sit out this game. I really like him to be able to hit that 100-yard mark once again. I am starting Josh Jacobs as one of my favorite starts in this matchup. The other favorite start, of course, is Devontae Adams. He's been doing phenomenal, and Derek Carr gets the nod as a streamable wide receiver option. The Rams defense has some hiccups in it, but they were still able to hold people like DJ Dallas and Travis Homer to a low yardage output last week. Kenneth Walker only had 3 rushes, but ran for 36 yards on those 3 rushes. There's a big difference in talent level between Kenneth Walker and, DJ Dallas, Tony Jones. I think I mentioned Homer in there, but he was actually out last week. Those are your likely starts for Seattle, but we'll get into that later on. For this one, again, you're rolling out Adams, you're rolling out Jacobs without much fear. If Jacobs can't go, and it looks like, let me pull his right here. He was a limited participant, which to me, that sounds like he is going to be able to go, which I think we're all in favor of that. I don't think you need to go out and scoop up like an Amir Abdullah or anything like that to feel safe. Foster Moreau also gets the nod as a startable tight end in this situation, but I'm probably not rolling out Mac Hollins unless I need to, which granted, there's a whole lot of wide receivers on bye. You might need to, and it's not necessarily a bad spot, but it's a spot where I would try and find other options if it's out there. On the Rams side of the ball, there is really nobody that is that exciting to go and pick up. Yes, the Las Vegas defense isn't great, but there's really nobody here that's doing that much. You may be able to get a nice little sneaky play with Tutu Atwell. I actually like that for betting more than I do for fantasy because I want to say his over under for yardage is still super low. I think the latest thing I saw was like 23 23 or 25 yards, something like that. That could definitely be a possibility because that wide receiver room is demolished. Cam Akers is probably going to get the majority of touches here, but again, what's that going to turn into? Probably not a whole lot. And I really don't like any major parts of this passing game. I would definitely be trying to look elsewhere, especially with it being a short week. It's just not it's not enjoyable, any of these matchups. Yes, Las Vegas is a very inconsistent team and leaves lots of room for variability. However, I think Las Vegas can cover the 6.5 point spread here. And with an over under of 43, it's going to be probably a lot of Las Vegas and not a whole lot of the Rams. Next up, we have surprisingly one of the best games on the slate here, at least in terms of real NFL. It's actually a kind of tough one for fantasy football, and that's the New York Jets traveling to Buffalo, a relatively short trip. I've done it many times, depending on how fast you drive. It's only like 6 or 7 hours. But it's a relatively low over under 43.5. The Bills are expected to beat the Jets by 9.5, which actually makes the Jets feel like a nice little cover play there. Um, you're probably starting, and not probably, you're starting Josh Allen. You're starting Stephon Diggs. And you're probably going to throw Devin Singletary into the mix again. There's a lot of running backs out, something to keep in mind. But you're probably going to roll with a guy like Devin Singletary in the mix there as a flex play. But keep in mind, the Jets have a really solid defense. These are one of those starts where, yes, they could end up getting blown up, but the Jets they have a really solid front and they have a really solid linebacking core. And Sauce Gardner has been a really good corner. Now, whether or not the Jets can match up to Buffalo is going to be a huge look into the future because chances are the Jets will get a playoff berth if they can keep some of their momentum going, especially with Mike White looking like a better passer. Do I want to roll him out? Definitely not. Both of these defenses are really good defenses. I don't really want to roll out Mike White. I will be starting Garrett Wilson if I get the chance. And then the real question to me is what's going to happen with Michael Carter. Just a quick look at the latest injury report. I want to say he was back in the lineup, and yeah, like he's off of the injury report completely. So is Bam going to get the work, or are they going to give Michael Carter the work? And chances are we're probably going to get a pretty even split here. And Buffalo's defense isn't necessarily one that you want to be starting running backs against, anyways. Again, if you have them, you gotta flex them. I get it. It's week 14. There are so many running backs on bye that I would much rather start than either of these two guys. But you're not going to start anybody on bye. So there you go. Not really much else out there. Maybe you throw a Conklin guy in there. Maybe you throw a Dawson Knox in there. Again, not particularly excited about them, but the tight end landscape has just been so all over the place this year. Again, not against it if you got to play them. If you have other options, I don't mind them. Like, are you going to be playing like a Foster Moreau over Conklin and Knox? I would. Are you going to play a Tyler Higbee over Conklin and Knox? That's a lot tougher because the Rams offense, even though Higbee has been so good earlier on, it's been so bad recently. I don't know. I think you kind of play Higbee if you're looking for volume and hoping that Wolford can get him the ball. But otherwise, I might take a shot with a guy like Knox being kind of the open, the guy left open by this Jets defense. All right, next up on the list here, we have Philadelphia traveling to New York, keeping it in the east side of both of the conferences. This, again, going to be a great game for real football, for playoff implications, because the Giants are still on the cusp of making a playoff run. It could definitely happen for them. Lots of real football implications. Fantasy wise, again, this is going to be a game where you're going to start your studs because they're your studs, but it's going to be difficult to start them with the same confidence that you would want to start them, especially in this final week. Again, Philly is expected to win this game by 7. I could definitely see that being the case. So over or under at 44. Again, the defenses here is what's making that over or under a little bit low. I think we could go over that, especially if the Eagles can do what they did to, say, the Titans defense, which they just took to school. On that note, you're starting Jalen Hurts, you're starting AJ Brown. You're probably going to throw Devonta Smith into the mix, even though he had a little bit of a letdown there, and he's had plenty of games where he's been like, "Hey, maybe I can trust Devonta Smith." Oh no, never mind, I can't trust Devonta Smith. Miles Sanders, you're probably going to get worked into the mix here, but again, the Giants have they have a pretty good defense. It's going to be tough to start him with that confidence that he's going to be able to hit that 15 mark, which you want in your starting running backs. But again, if he becomes a flex play for you, totally fine with that. Outside of that, I'm not really touching anybody else on that Eagles offense. On the Giants side of the ball, you're starting Barkley, and then I don't think you can start Jones in this matchup, even though there is the possibility for him to have a really good rushing game. There's also the possibility for him to just get lit up by this Eagles defense. And I think that there's a little bit more of that possibility than the other, which also means that a guy like Darius Slayton, you're probably thinking of him as like a wide receiver 4, maybe a wide receiver 5 in this matchup, even though he's had some pretty nice matchups where he's been in the top 36 or even a little bit better. And then other than that, I'm not touching Richie James. I'm not touching Isaiah Hodgins. Maybe throwing Daniel Bellinger in there. But again, not somebody that I'm necessarily excited to go ahead and get into any lineups. On the other, no, that was it for that one. No other side of the ball. On to the next game. Jacksonville taking on Tennessee. Like I just mentioned, Tennessee just got taken to school by the Eagles. Jacksonville, though, you have Trevor Lawrence that was dealing with a little bit of an injury. Doesn't seem like it's going to stop him from playing, but definitely something to keep in mind as you're looking at your lineups for the week. Um, uh, and then Zay Jones had a limited practice. Actually, looking at Trevor Lawrence did not practice on Wednesday, so that makes me now feel like I might want to check a little bit harder for Trevor Lawrence, and just start looking for a backup plan if you need one there. But Trevor Lawrence is the highest projected on this Jacksonville side. Christian Kirk right behind him, both of them expected to score in the 15-point range. Christian Kirk is a favorite for me as possibly one of the league winners off of draft day. He just has been so good for where you've gotten him in terms of fantasy. But if Trevor Lawrence can't go, obviously that dings him a little bit. Travis Etienne is off of the injury report. He's all the way back. He looked back last week. You're going to be rolling him out there, and Zay Jones becomes a nice little start as well. And Evan Ingram is also, especially in a situation where we have so many tight ends that, I mean, we have 6 teams on bye. Tight ends are going to be super limited. They're limited already. Now you have an even smaller pool to choose from. Evan Ingram becomes a nice little choice there, especially if Trevor Lawrence is healthy. If he's not healthy, he kind of gets moved off my list. Tennessee side of the ball, Derrick Henry, you're rolling him out there. He's projected for 17 points. Definitely going to fire him up. Ryan Tannehill in this one becomes a real question mark for me. I don't like Tannehill, and I don't like this passing offense, especially because Treylon Burks, and this is the big one you want to pay attention to, is still in concussion protocol. He did not practice on Wednesday. Derrick Henry was limited on Wednesday. Just keep that in mind. I don't think there's anything serious happening in that regard, but just something to keep in mind as we get closer to the weekend. But yeah, Derrick Henry, rolling him out there. Treylon Burks, if he's healthy, he's worth rolling out there. He's been getting worked into the offense a little bit more. But Jacksonville, again, has a sneaky good defense that really is developed from the line to the linebackers. Still can get beat in the deep ball, which is where Burks can really make his money. So I don't mind having Burks as an option in my lineup, especially if I can put him in as a flex. That game has the third lowest over under at 41, which again, mostly because these teams have they have sneaky good defenses, even though a team like the Philly just Philly put in work. And it's tough for me to say as a Cowboys fan, but they put in work this past weekend. All right. Not really much else to talk about there. The spread's 4. It's not really that it's not a great spread. It's not a great over-under. It's probably a game that I'm gonna avoid in most cases in terms of um any actual betting. But in terms of fantasy, like I said, I'm rolling out those studs and feeling pretty confident about it. Like Henry and ETN, I think you're going to have in your 2 starting running back spots, unless you have somehow a greater option than that. But I can't think of too many of them. All right, next up, Dallas gets another cakewalk. Dallas, I was super excited about the Indy game and they thrashed them. Now Dallas is hosting Houston, little interstate rivalry there, and this should be another thrashing. Dallas's defense is phenomenal. Houston turns the ball over a ton. And they're just not a very potent offense to begin with. Damian Pierce has cooled down considerably. Again, though, if this is a week you're going to start him, you're going to start him because of limited options. But I wouldn't expect much out of Damian Pierce. He's projected to score the most points on the Houston offense at 12, which just says how bad this offense is. That Damian Pierce is only projected at 12 fantasy points. Davis Mills is only projected at 10, which again just shows how bad he is. Nico Collins becomes the only kind of feel good about starter. And if he's pulling Trayvon Diggs in any type of shadow coverage, granted the Cowboys do a really good kind of zone look, but if Nico Collins gets matched up against Trayvon Diggs, that's just going to be a nightmare for Nico Collins. Brandon Cooks, it looks like, is going to play in this game. Let me pull his latest one. And actually, no, he didn't participate again. I was hearing some rumors that he either is not going to play another game as not a Texan, but not play another game in 2022, or he looks like he's starting to get back a little bit healthy. And it looks like he didn't participate again. It looks like it's leaning closer to the former of him not playing another game in 2022 because I mean, let's be honest, the Texans are kind of trash. Dallas has a 16.5 point line in this one and an over under of 45. So Vegas is telling you that the Cowboys are expected to score 31 points in this game, and Houston is only expected to score 14. That's a bit high even for this, and especially with the Cowboys coming off of the last victory. I'm excited about the over in this game. I don't know about the Cowboys covering that 16.5 spread. That is a bit high for my liking. It is definitely one of the highest I've seen of the season so far. But I mean, betting the Cowboys to win this game is super easy. Next up, sorry, I didn't talk about the Cowboys side of the game. Cowboys side, you're starting CeeDee Lamb, you're starting Dak Prescott, you're starting Pollard and Zeke in this one. I would totally expect both of them to find the end zone. Starting Dalton Schultz. If you're in a pinch, I'd even throw Michael Gallup into the mix there. I'm not going to go so desperate that I'm going to throw a guy like Noah Brown or anybody else into the lineup. There, you're just doing dart throws, hoping you hit that guy that gets a touchdown. I'm not gonna feel confident in any type of managed league for that. But yeah, you're starting your main group of studs in this Cowboys offense. You're starting them all. Again, I would put money on Zeke finding the end zone. I'd put money on Pollard finding the end zone, and I'd put money on CeeDee Lamb finding the end zone as well. If you want to get a little creative, throw Gallup or Schultz into any of that. I think you can get you can get pretty much those 3 Cowboys all getting into the end zone pretty confidently this week. Next up, we have Minnesota traveling to Detroit. This is so the Detroit Lions have become so fun. They're not necessarily good, but they're fun. They have the highest over under of the week at 52.5. We're expecting the Detroit Lions are actually favored in this game against Minnesota, which is really interesting, especially considering their records. It would be it would it man, it's tough to bet, um it's tough to bet the Lions to win. Let's be honest. Let's slow down for a minute. My thoughts were getting all jumbled. It's tough to bet the Lions to win. And I would much rather be betting on Minnesota to win this game. Again, I can't there's got to be something off with that spread there because that just doesn't seem, I don't know, maybe one of my formulas is off or something. That just does not seem like it could be right. Yeah, the away team is negative too. Wow, that is crazy. I can't. I don't know how you don't bet on the Vikings here. Yes, they have a decent number of did not participates, mostly on the defensive side of the ball. But I just see the offense of the Vikings being able to keep pace with the exciting and fun offense of the Detroit Lions. And Minnesota has a they have a defense that can be beaten, but they have a defense that is just a solid-ish kind of defense, which I know is like a great superlative. But there's not a whole lot to really like in this matchup. I feel like for Detroit winning it, I'm very surprised at Detroit being favored in this matchup. That being said, lots of fantasy plays all over the place in this matchup. This is your matchup for any type of DFS type of chalky type of runs. Amon-Ra St. Brown, get him into your lineups. He's been playing phenomenal. Jared Goff, I think you can start pretty confidently. And again, the big question mark always comes down to Swift and Williams. Who is going to be healthy? And DeAndre Swift did end up back on the injury report. He was a limited participant on Wednesday. You can almost count like clockwork Jamal Williams scoring a touchdown, but this game is going to be those main guys. Maybe DJ Sharks mixed into there, but definitely keep an eye on Swift. He was finally not on the injury report before week 13, and he looked really good in week 13, but it instantly ends up back on the injury report. So keep an eye on that. Justin Jefferson on the Minnesota side of the ball projected for 22 points. You have to expect Justin Jefferson to really get in. You have to expect him to hit those projections, especially against the Detroit defense that has just been not only hit with injuries like Jeff Okuda, who was one of their high draft picks, did not participate, and just a handful of other kind of injuries left out there. But aside from that, just not a terrific defense. So you have to think that Justin Jefferson's going to get his this week. You have to think that Kirk Cousins is going to do fine this week. You have to think that Dalvin Cook is going to do fine this week. And even though I'm pretty much off the Adam Thielen train, I'd throw him into the mix here as well. And TJ Hawkinson's been doing really well in that tight end position. Finally paying off some dividends from people who drafted him early on and didn't really get much out of him earlier in the season. But like I said, this is a game where you could definitely do some of those more creative stacks where you're stacking quarterback, wide receiver on one team and wide receiver on the other team. They're probably going to be a little bit more expensive, but I would feel perfectly fine paying up for either Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown and really paying up for both of them and working on getting some other cheaper options out there. Next up on the slate is Baltimore traveling to Pittsburgh. It looks like this is going to be a rainy, snowy, cold, windy Pittsburgh type of game, which is a whole lot of fun, except for fantasy football. The over-under is tied for the lowest at 37 here. One of the lowest sets of projections, both sides of the ball here for Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Pitt is expected to pull the game out by 2.5 points, with mostly that coming, I would say, on the news of Lamar Jackson being a did not participate on Wednesday. It looks like he's probably going to be out for a couple of weeks with a PCL injury. So it's going to be all in the hands of Tyler Huntley, who is projected to be the highest point scorer at 15.99 points. I'm not thrilled about getting him into any lineups. Hopefully, if you're in a super flex, you have another option to pivot to. Obviously, desperation is desperation, but I'm not thrilled about it. Mark Andrews, I do think takes a little bit of a ding here, but when he's the only option, I think he takes a ding in terms of confidence level for me, but is the highest skilled position projected player in honestly this entire matchup at 13. He's projected higher than anybody on either side of the ball, wide receiver, tight end, running back. You're going to play Mark Andrews if you have him. Confidence goes down a little bit, though. The question mark becomes kind of who's healthy at the running back position for Baltimore. It could be Gus Edwards. If he is, this becomes the type of game where you might want to put him in there, expecting him to just kind of volume wise, especially if the weather's bad. It looks like it's probably going to be a close game. I don't expect either of these offenses to really put up many points in this game. It could just be like that kind of slow grinding, not the high scoring, exciting game that you would I mean, honestly, I don't know if anybody was expecting that from this game, but most fantasy players are hoping for. On the Pittsburgh side of the ball, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Pat Fryermuth, George Pickens, probably going to work them in some way, shape, or form. But again, keeping in mind this Baltimore defense has been opportunistic at times, as well as the fact that the weather is expected to be pretty terrible for this game, which may lead to Kenny Pickett. Remember, little hands. Maybe he doesn't hold the ball so well in the cold weather, in the snow, in the rain. I don't know. I'm just making that up. I feel like it's a weird narrative, but it's kind of fun. Could impact them, right? This is a game where if I can, I'm definitely staying away from it just about every way, shape, and form possible. Moving on to the next game, we have the Cleveland Brownies going to Cincinnati. This looks like a game where Cincinnati's been starting to roll. This looks like a game where Cincinnati's gonna roll the Browns here. The spread is only 6 points in favor of the Bengals. Again, the Browns, yes, 5-7, not a terrible record. People are kind of expecting Deshaun Watson to come back and do a little bit more for the Browns. He didn't need to last game because his defense scored 3 points. Or sorry, 3 touchdowns. That's not going to happen in this game. This is a game where I see Cincinnati really taking over. Joe Burrow is going to do just fine. Jamar Chase is going to do just fine. Mixon is a guy that you want to check health on. Make sure he is a full go. And it looks like he is off of the injury report. Oops. Nope. Sorry. He was a full participant back in on Wednesday. So yes, should be coming off of the injury report. Despite Samaje Perine doing pretty well while he was there, I don't expect this to be kind of a split backfield, though. This is not like the Michael Carter Bam Knight situation. This is much more Joe Mixon is solidified in that starting role. So I expect him to come back in that essential workhorse type of situation. And you're going to play Higgins. You're going to play, I think I mentioned already, you're going to play Chase. Boyd, you might be able to sprinkle in there a little bit as well. On the Cleveland side of the ball, I'm still not confident playing Deshaun Watson until I can see really him come all the way back. I don't mind playing Nick Chubb in this matchup. Cooper, DPJ, Njoku probably going to get the nod, mostly because of just limited tight end options and what he's been able to put on tape so far this season. There's been some really high points there, but not necessarily somebody that I am. Cooper and Peoples-Jones, not necessarily an offense that I'm trying to target the pass catchers of. And Njoku was a limited participant, just to keep that on your radar. Amari Cooper did not participate. May just be a veteran rest day, but again, go ahead, check that out. Keep an eye on it as we move forward. Next up on the slate, we have Kansas City traveling to Denver. This game, I'm surprised this spread isn't greater. Yes, I know Denver has a really solid defense, but that offense is just atrocious. The fact that this game is only a 9.5 point spread is almost as mind blowing as Detroit being favored to win their game. Um, but over under again, right, kind of in the middle of the pack of the week of 43.5, a little bit lower than what you'd hope to see. But most of that is the fact that Denver just can't score points. They are the most anemic offense, I would say, in the entire NFL this year. And I don't think that's that hot of a take. Russell Wilson has been atrocious. He's projected for 14 points. I do not expect him to meet that. Jerry Judy has a little bit of potential, especially with Cortland Sutton nursing an injury. Dolchik has looked good at times, but again, not somebody that you can necessarily start with any type of confidence in expecting him to do well. But again, if he's the only guy left on the waiver wire, I don't mind playing him just because of what he's been able to do in kind of limited reps, and real like limited real opportunities. Like, yes, he's gotten a handful of targets, but have they been good targets? Have they been in the red zone? And, like, this team is almost allergic to their side of the field. So it's going to be really, really difficult to start anybody out there with any type of confidence. I'm not looking forward to this game at all. Um, yeah, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be real tough to to watch this game at all. On the Kansas City side of the ball, Patrick Mahomes popped up on the injury report, full participant, should be good to go. You're going to start him out there. 22 points projected. That's just the regular for him. Travis Kelsey, same thing, 19 points projected, just the regular for him. Um, is the Denver defense going to try and limit this offense? Absolutely. Do they have the playmakers to do that? Absolutely. To what extent they're going to be able to limit the offense is going to be the true question. This is not an offense that gets stopped necessarily. This is an offense that gets limited. Juju, you're probably going to see him get a decent number of looks, and Isaiah Pacheco, who's probably going to get the most touches in the game. But again, that's really tough sledding. Pacheco becomes a guy that I'm perfectly happy sitting him, and expecting him to be the letdown here in this really tough matchup against Denver, and unless this is one of those games where Kansas City ends up at the 1 yard line a couple of times and they just punch it in with Pacheco. I don't see him getting much in terms of work outside of between the 20s, and I don't see him getting much in terms of fantasy points because there's just not much to be garnered if you're inside your own 20s or inside the 20s. All right. Yeah, in Denver, I already talked way too much about them. They're a trash team. All right, next up, Carolina and Seattle. From one trash team to another trash team. Carolina, they cut Baker Mayfield. I didn't even talk about that of Baker Mayfield going to the Rams. May come into play later on, but again, who cares? Carolina, you have Sam Darnold. Who cares, right? It's a ditto. He did do a little bit more. It seemed like for the offense at times. DJ Moore is definitely a desperation start when you think about just the sheer number of wide receivers that are out on bye. But again, you don't do it with any confidence, especially with a Seattle defense that can turn up the heat. And I could see Sam Darnold having a really rough game. I could see Moore having a really rough game. I could see Deonta Foreman having a really rough game. This is not an offense that you want to target for pretty much anything. But on the flip side of that, Geno Smith should have himself a decent game. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenny Walker, it looks like did not participate. Let me just make sure. Yeah, he did not participate on Wednesday. It looks like he might be sitting, which is just a gut punch for so many teams. Again, especially with 6 teams on bye, a just stud fantasy player like Walker, him not being there is, it's gut wrenching. If he is good to go, I put him out there, even though coming off of the injury makes me nervous, but you're throwing him out there, no questions asked, getting him into that lineup if he is healthy. If he's not healthy, I would I would lean a healthy Travis Homer over guys like Tony Jones and DJ Dallas. Um, but if Travis Homer isn't healthy as well, I think Tony Jones gets the majority of the work here, and I'm not sure how beneficial that's going to be to fantasy players. Yes, absolute desperation. I get it. It's late in the season. You've had a lot of injuries. I've had a lot of injuries. I get it. Tony Jones becomes the best option, in my opinion, if Kenneth Walker can't go and if Homer can't go as well, because it looks like Homer's still dealing with that hamstring injury. And actually, let me see. Yeah, he was a limited participant, so he was limited last. I think it was limited last week also, and then it was ended up being ruled out. So I would do Homer, Tony Jones, and then DJ Dallas again if Walker can't go. But Carolina has an okay defense. You can get them in there here or there. I wouldn't be starting them as a defense, but I could see Seattle just kind of wearing down the defensive side of the ball for the Panthers, especially with your speed options with DK and Lockett and things like that. All right. Next up on the list, we have the last of the 4 o'clock games. We have Tampa Bay taking on San Francisco. Um, that was super weird. My TV just turned on. Nobody else is home. Turn on the TV. We have Tampa Bay taking on San Francisco. This looks like a really fun and interesting game. I expect San Francisco to win this game. The fact that they're only giving up 3.5 points makes it seem like we could have um, an opportunity here. Yes, it looks like Brock Purdy is going to get the start because Garoppolo is expected to be out for a little while. Um, this is actually one of the lowest over-unders of the week at 37. Both of these teams have defenses that are really solid, but you have guys like Christian McCaffrey. It'll be interesting to see if Deebo Samuel comes back with a full week of practice with Purdy because Debo kind of had been falling off a little bit, especially with CMC and Kittle kind of coming into their own with Garoppolo as the quarterback. It'll again interesting to see with Ayuk because Ayuk has kind of been the same. Especially with Jimmy G coming in, he's had a lot of those deep shots where Ayuk is. I don't want to say better in terms of talent, but better in terms of fantasy, was really putting out more consistent outputs than Samuel was. It'll, like I said, it'd be really interesting to see what happens in this matchup. Kittle is going to be a starting tight end for you, especially with all of the tight ends on bye, and just tight end being naturally depleted. On the Tampa Bay side of the ball, yes, they're going up against a difficult San Fran offense, but again, you have a whole bunch of studs there as well. You have Brady, you have Godwin, you had Evans, and you have Fournette and White, who, again, it'll be interesting to see what that split is going to look like as both of them get healthier and healthier and healthier. I think this is Fournette's backfield when he is healthy, but White has gotten some sprinkles in and looks good when he does get in there. But again, just something to kind of keep in mind. There may not be as much fantasy potential in this game as you want it to be, just because there are two really good defenses matching up against some good offenses. But I always expect there to be some wins on both sides of the ball, which to me, you're going to keep rolling out Chris Godwin if you got him. You're going to keep rolling out Mike Evans if you got him. Are they going to hit the 14 and 12 points respectively that they're expected to? That might be a little bit tougher. It may be one of them does a lot better and one does a little bit worse. But all of that's going to be real tough to figure out ahead of this game. But again, in terms of managing your roster, those guys are not getting swapped out for like a Mac Hollins is projected at like 8 points, and I think he's going to have a better than 8 point game. I'm not putting Mac Hollins in over any of those type of guys, right? Same thing with like Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson is only projected to score like 2 or 3 points less than Mike Evans. That's not going to happen in any of my managed rosters, and I wouldn't advise anybody else to do that as well. Uh, Now, moving on to the late game, we have New England traveling to Arizona. This now becomes a little bit more of a fun game to target for fantasy purposes. Over under at 43 and a half. The spread, New England is expected to win this game by a point and a half. I again, another one. I don't understand why. I don't see why New England would be favored in this matchup. I would definitely lean towards Arizona in this side and that's not necessarily because Arizona has been um particularly effective this season. They're 4-8. The Pats are 6-6. But this just feels like one of those games. The Patriots on the road are a slightly different team than they are at home. Um, and this is a defense that has been opportunistic in creating turnovers, but has let up to some of the better offenses that they've gone up against. And this to me is a game where Murray to Hopkins is going to happen a lot. James Conner should be able to run against this team, and it looks like we're getting back. We're getting a lot healthier. And actually, sorry, I switched these around. This is the Monday night game, not the Sunday night game. My bad. We're getting a healthy Marquise Brown in there as well. Rondell Moore has been worked into the mix. I expect this to be a game where Arizona should be able to move the ball against the Patriots. The question is, with the Patriots' classic philosophy of bend don't break, are we going to get situations where Arizona drives it the length of the field, can't score in the red zone, kicks a field goal, and then we get guys like Ramondre Stevenson, Mac Jones, Jacoby Myers, who those are your main three on this Patriots offense. Are we going to see them get lucky, or are we going to see the defense get lucky or take advantage of a turnover because Kyler Murray can turn the ball over? Are we going to see that happen? And that's how we get New England pulling out that 1 point favorite. But like I said, I'm always in favor of taking plus money. And it looks like, oh, actually, it looks like the latest consensus is -109 for Arizona, which seems weird. So definitely check your books. Go on to bettingdata.com. You can actually see all the different books. See if Arizona is getting any plus money there, because I would definitely take them as plus money, or at least plus the points. Because, like I said, I see Arizona being able to move the ball against them. That being said, Ramondre, definite starter. He's been phenomenal for you throughout the season, especially once Damian Harris went down and really opened the door for him to just take off. Instant start right there. Mac Jones, not excited about it, but not necessarily against mixing him in. He is not a player that I'm super in love with. I don't like. He's a very mediocre seems so mean, but he just seems like a very mediocre quarterback. Doesn't make a lot of great plays, doesn't make a lot of bad plays. He's just kind of floating around in the middle. That does help out Jacoby Myers, because this is a game where I could see Jacoby Myers getting a bunch of those possession receptions, which he is great at. Outside of that, though, I don't like Hunter Henry. I don't like Devontae Parker. Damian Harris is taking a complete backseat, so you can kind of write him off as well. But that's all for the New England Arizona game. Next up is the Miami Chargers game, and this one's gonna be fun. I think we went from like we had two that were like it's gonna be kind of slow. I could see it be like those like 2 yards pile of dust and see where we're at type of games. This scoring is projected at the second highest of the week. Vegas has the over under at 51 and a half, with Miami being 3 point favorites. projected points all over the place. As a game, it is setting the mark for projected fantasy points at 215. Looking at the full teams, that is 15 points more than the next closest game. Austin Eckler, you're going to be rolling him out there. He just gets so many receptions and force fed the ball. You have to have him in your lineup. Justin Herbert, you're going to have him in your lineup. Keenan Allen looks like he's healthy. Knock on wood. Let's kind of keep that going. Keenan Allen, and it looks like Mike Williams is going to be healthy as well. Again, a little bit of questionable there. I want to say was the last one. Let me just double check. He was a limited participant on Wednesday. So again, going to pop is questionable. Definitely keep an eye on that. Palmer, Everett, Carter, all guys that you can mix into lineups here, especially if Mike Williams can't go. Then guys like Palmer and Carter obviously get a little bit of a boost there. But all different guys that you can take advantage of here. Everett has been a really nice tight end option throughout the season. Again, I've said it probably too many times already, but a guy that, given the amount of just tight end variability and just tight ends that put up no points, and the amount of people that are on bye this week, again, 6 teams on bye, Gerald Everett becomes a really easy, like, yep, if I got him, he's in my starting lineup, which you've probably been doing for a little while anyways. On the Miami side of the ball, it's either Hill or Waddle, or both of them. Last week, Waddle was the guy to take a dud. Unfortunately, hurt me in a couple of leagues. That's all right. No hard feelings. He's still going right back into the starting lineup. Tua was on the injury report this week. I want to say, yes, he was a limited participant on Wednesday. Outside of that, there's a handful of guys on defense, and Waddle, a limited participant as well. Keep that in mind. But again, Waddle's going right back into the lineup if he's healthy. Hill is obviously in your starting lineup. Tua, if he's healthy, obviously in your starting lineup. And this is the week where I think you can bounce back either Mostert or Jeff Wilson Jr. if you have them in your lineups. I told you last week, like, be wary of them, especially against that San Fran defense, which is also why I'm a little wary on Fournette and Rachaad White. Not only are they going to be in a split backfield, similarly to what Miami was when they faced San Fran last week, but San Fran's defense is just a very strong rush defense, and just a strong defense overall. Miami, we could see a little bit of a bounce back for those two. Again, if I have one of them, I probably don't have both of them. Definitely not starting both of them. But if I have one of them, I probably am going to end up mixing them into my lineup, considering guys like Aaron Jones, Dillon, Kamara, Patterson, Gibson, Brian Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, all startable running backs are all out on bye this week. So if I have a Mostert or a Wilson, I'm probably throwing him in there, expecting them to get around that 12, I won't say 12, expecting them to kind of be in that 10 to 15 point range, at least one of them, but not expecting them to be like a top 12, a top 24 type of running back on a normal week. This week, because of the limited amount of running backs, like, they may end up as an RB2 on the week, but when you look over the course of the season, like, what should be an RB2's numbers, they're going to be below that. But again, I don't mind mixing them in, especially in those flex type of situations. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is all of week 14, all in one beautiful little package. If I missed anything, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. Check out the show at The Fantasy Facts. Check out Fantasy Data at fantasydata.nfl. Go to fantasydata.com. Use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS, and save yourself 20% off your subscription. Any subscription. I recommend the premium one. That's what I use to put together all my sheets, because you can export the data and do whatever you want with it. if you want to get that little extra nerdy like me, or if you want to just check out the site, they have all the things that you could want to look at. They have articles, injury news, projections like we use today, all of that great stuff. Also, check out bettingdata.com. That's where all the odds came from. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the show. Till next time, catch you on the flip side.